Speaking of inaugural, I am thrilled to have a meeting in person for the first time. Nicholas Oliver. Nicholas is a candidate, if you will. But notice how you just said candidate. I did not say a party. A candidate for the mayoralty of the great city of East Providence, Rhode Island. He is, as they say in East Providence, a townie. He exhibits townie pride. And he's going to bring us tonight a flavor of both what's happening in East Providence, both politically, in the business scene, socially, the transition from, I guess, a town manager's role to a true representative mayoralty, and if elected, what his plans are and where his priorities are. We've got about an hour or so to spend with him, so we will be outrage porn free. We will be civilly disobedient, but we will be focused on issues. As I pointed out this morning on the Lively Experiment, my frustration is that the media spends far too much time handicapping elections. They spend far too much time analyzing fundraising. They don't spend nearly enough time talking about what's really important to Rhode Islanders of every stripe, and that is, of course, the issues. How you can impact the lives of everyday Rhode Islanders. That's what we do here on the Coalition. Welcome to the show for the first time.
Pat, nice to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you for coming in. So let's start from scratch. We're going to get into your background first, but you know, there's a fascinating transition taking place here that you don't see every day. East Providence, really, I'll call it an under-talked about, if you will, city in Rhode Island. Very, very important, active waterfront, a lot of industry, thriving cultural scene, great town, and yet outside of some rather interesting moments in local politics over the last few years, really interesting at times, really, I think kind of underreported, not really recognized. So what exactly is happening right now in terms of East Providence government?
I think that was a great summary of East Providence, is that it is one of the few remaining areas in the state that has a lot of opportunity and untapped potential. East Providence is in the process of changing our charter. In the last election, 73% of the voters elected to change our charter from the city manager form of government to elect a full-time mayor. There will be an election to be scheduled soon by the Secretary of State that will have additional amendments to our charter to be able to create that separation of powers between the city council and the new mayor.
Right.
And then in 2018, we will have an election to have our first mayor, which is an exciting opportunity for the city.
Absolutely. What was the motivating factor behind this really a radical shift in how you folks do business there in East Providence?
Well, I think some of it was politically motivated by the people, that we were just tired of seeing an ineffective city councils of the past cycling through city councils and then cycling through 6 city managers in 7 years.
Right.
I know I, as a voter, said, I've had enough. We need to have stability in our community. There are too many vacant buildings along the waterfront. There are too many vacant commercial and industrial buildings throughout the city, and that means loss of jobs, economic hardships, and that we need to have some revitalization, a renaissance, if you will, that is coordinated through a full-time CEO accountable by the residents of the city, the voters of the city, to be able to make sustainable changes to make it more affordable to live there.
Right. And it really is fascinating because East Providence is probably one of the true legitimate melting pots in Rhode Island, both economically, socially. Describe some of the neighborhoods to folks who never leave Providence, or where I'm from. Understand that Papa Gino's is their form of high art pizza. Talk about the city itself and give us kind of a quick 2 or 3 minute tour of different parts of East Providence.
Well, you can keep your Federal Hill. I'll enjoy the Portuguese restaurants and the many other diverse restaurants within the community. So, growing up, people started to break away from living in communities based on their nationality and the church that they attended. Still predominantly Portuguese community when I was growing up there as a child, with a significant Cape Verdean population.
Right.
Now that has changed, and I think part of that is because when people immigrated into Rhode Island and they settled here in Providence, they wanted to send their children to a better school. So when they saved up some money, bought a home with a yard, had a little bit of land for themselves, be able to put their children into a better school, they chose East Providence. So they realized that you didn't have to pack an overnight bag, you didn't have to get your passport stamped to go over to the Washington Bridge, and be able to get a great opportunity, educate your kids well, and be part of that towny pride that we cherish.
Absolutely. Explain the whole townie thing to me. All right. What exactly is a townie?
So townie's pride, or being a townie, means something different to everybody. I've never heard it being specifically defined. So I'll give you the college essay version 20 some odd years ago when I applied for Citizen Scholarship. For me, townie pride means that it's a love and respect for the community and the school system and the teachers that provided you the foundation to be able to take from that and be able to better yourself, better your family, and build a career or livelihood that you give back to the community. That's what townie pride means to me. But like I said, it means something a little bit different to everybody.
Well, it's interesting because I've been, you've contributed to this establishment, the Go Local Prov, on a number of different levels, and I've been following you kind of afar from Facebook. And the one thing that is sort of the special sauce for potentially great mayors is this sort of, and it's got to be in your DNA, a real love for the actual city. I mean, it strikes me that you are East Providence, and you don't have, I'm sure the world holds great things for you in the future, but it seems to me that your near obsession is with East Providence, and just you've embraced the community. And I happen to I worked in a little place called New York City for a number of years when a guy named Ed Koch was mayor, and you never had any doubt. I had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times, very briefly, but you never had any doubt whatsoever that he was New York and New York was him.
Absolutely.
They became indistinguishable at times, and I've just gotten that sense from you because you exude this whole townie thing, and it's funny because there are towns in the state that don't have that kind of collective soul. They try hard, but what I've been impressed with, I've gotten to know people from different communities from my own political outreach, is just listen. It's almost an attitude of listen. We can pick on East Providence, but not you.
That's very true. East Providence is one large family. Despite its large population, we are all interconnected. I think Rhode Island learned about interconnectivity when the Station nightclub tragedy occurred. In East Providence, we know what the state had learned at that unfortunate period. We are all interconnected somehow. We work together. We do activities together. Our kids play sports together. We're neighbors. We go to the same church. We go to the same Portuguese clubs. Those sort of things. There's always opportunities for us to integrate. One of my platforms within my campaign is the We Are One East Providence initiative to bring the community together outside of just the fragmented cultural and community events throughout the summer, but instilling that townie pride for those that were born and raised here, like myself, and those that didn't have the opportunity to grow up in East Providence, that either that moved here as an adult and then chose to raise their children here, or if they did grow up in East Providence and their parents chose for them to have an out-of-district placement, like going to LaSalle or what have you, or Bayview or St. Ray's, that you don't have that same level of townie pride. And I want to bring that back to a larger scale because we're seeing that deficit happening in both our communities. We're seeing, like I said, businesses close, homes not being kept up, and people just having a very negative opinion about the city. You don't have to go too far than the various East Providence Facebook pages to hear about the various complaints that people have. And it's about the changing culture, that there's not as much pride and upkeep in the community, and the fact that taxes and fees are increasing, but they're not seeing tangible results. So I want to bring that pride back, and that's what the We Are One East Providence initiative is about.
One of the geniuses of a very controversial mayor in Rhode Island's recent past, of course I'm speaking about Vincent A. Buddy Cianci, one of his geniuses was that he created an identity and a brand here in Providence. By definition, the Renaissance City. And the Renaissance City was one of those brands that could speak to people at 100 different levels. It didn't obsess over Federal Hill. It didn't obsess over Smith Street. It didn't obsess over the South Side or the West End or the East Side. Yeah. It didn't obsess over any one of the Fox Point neighborhoods or any throughout the product. It created the notion that there was an identity and a brand that Providence would be represented by. And in doing so, there was an inordinate amount of pride generated, and it was directed very positively in so many different ways to building up downtown Providence and the variety of neighborhoods. And people became much more invested in the community. And I sense that that's what you're trying to do with East Providence, where you think of not just the neighborhoods, but you're thinking of people who are looking at East Providence as sort of a way of life, not just a city. And in doing so, you can then attract the type of businesses organically that help a city grow without the kind of crazy corporate welfare that's going on. You can attract people back into the city schools and the local schools. You can attract people in to support local institutions before they feel like they have to go somewhere else to have a good time. You actually redirect that energy inward, and as a result, everyone on so many different levels prospers. And that's how great cities are made. And great cities don't have to be the capital city. They don't have to be the biggest guys in town. But they have to be a community, and they have to be a city. Sounds easy to do. It takes time, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, your background, you're from East Providence. You went to East Providence High.
I did.
University of Hartford, and then you got a master's in public affairs up at UMass?
Yes, I did.
All right, so talk to me a little about the educational background. Is public affairs, is that like public administration, or is it?
It is.
It is. All right, and then you've spent the greater part of your career so far, you're a young guy, but the greater part of your career working heavily in the not-for-profit sector and working for NGOs and directly in the community. Tell us a little bit about your work experience.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to work for some great organizations outside of my educational experience. Right before 9/11, I was a state director, government affairs for the American Heart Association, right down the road here, only a couple of blocks away from where your studio is, and was there throughout the 9/11 years and into that mid part of the first decade of our century. And we had some great strides there with expanding public access to defibrillation, immunity liability laws for Good Samaritans to perform CPR. And I think most notably, one of the great civil rights activism of my generation would be to have smoke-free workplaces statewide. And I know that smoking issues and the right for folks to be able to consume tobacco is a personal thing for some folks, and saying that's a little bit of too much government outreach, reaching in and telling me what to do. But I think the exposure of secondhand smoke far outweighs that, and that was our argument going in for the ability for anybody to be in the community, to be able to come out and to utilize public spaces, government spaces, restaurants, etc., and not be exposed to secondhand smoke, particularly those that have a health condition. In the case that I represented, those that are cardiac survivors and stroke victims, survivors, that wanted to be able to participate in the community but felt restricted to do such. Another great part of my resume is that I worked for the Sierra Club. And the Sierra Club was a great opportunity for me to flex my business experience and to expand the hybrid and electric vehicles into the Rhode Island market, as well as the development of charging stations. That impacted me personally. I drive today a hybrid vehicle. I plug mine in at the end of the day.
Which one?
I drive a Chevy Volt. I love it.
I'm a libertarian who drives a Fusion Energy.
Yeah, it's a great car.
There you go.
It's zippy and it's quiet. My neighbor keeps telling me, I never know when you're coming. It has a little buzz like a golf cart. but it has an efficiency of a regular sedan. It's fun.
My neighbors always know when I'm coming. Tony can attest to that. So now you currently, where are you currently working?
So for the past 5 years, I've served as the executive director, which is the chief executive officer position for an organization called the Rhode Island Partnership for Home Care. Mm-hmm. The partnership is a trade association for home care, home health care, and hospice agencies. Mm-hmm. The industry itself has 47 companies all across the state, 8 based in East Providence, that provide care to children with disabilities, adults with disabilities, elders, and those that are at end of life. That industry generates just over $500 million annually into Rhode Island's economy.
Right. Significant challenges there right now, I would imagine, with with medical reimbursements, with Medicare issues, with wage laws, wage issues, minimum wage issues. That's got to be one of the most difficult. It's got to be very rewarding, but at the same time, one of the most difficult industries to somehow work your way through the current political landscape. And what is the state of that industry right now?
It's a difficult time for providers to operate. It should be challenging though, because we want to ensure that we're providing the highest quality of care in the most cost-effective environment. Mm-hmm. So healthcare shouldn't be easy to enter in as a business. The majority of my providers are independent proprietaries, true mom and pop businesses that are vested in delivering care in the homes of those that live in their communities. You can't get more local than that. So you can understand the theme of county pride there as well. But it is a difficult environment here with the instability of the Affordable Care Act, what will happen with its future, payment reductions as a result of its implementation on the federal level. Mm-hmm. And then here in the state, we have this Reinventing Medicaid initiative under the current gubernatorial administration that hasn't generated higher quality care, but has led to reductions in the amount of providers, particularly in the long-term care space, but also reductions in the amount of staff that are able to generate care, because we are seeing we've seen increases in reimbursement, but they've really been reductions because we've been told specifically how to allocate those funds, but they haven't improved quality of life for our paraprofessional staff, and it has constricted our ability to be able to go and compete in the current marketplace.
Right, and just from what I've read, and as I like to joke, I'm not an expert, I literally play one on the radio. My understanding of the market that you inhabit is that Rhode Island, compared to, say, nationally, is disproportionately small business independently owned within your space. You've got a lot of smaller private operators as opposed to some of the consolidation that's taken place in other parts of the country. That seems to be a flavor of many industries in Rhode Island, where you still got lots of locally owned businesses. So, I'm not sure if people truly appreciate the thin edge that some of your operators have to work on. You've got enormous legal liabilities, enormous responsibilities, a real challenge in terms of compensating people in the workplace, and at the same time, this grotesque level of uncertainty in a world that provides care to some of the most challenged folks that we have within our greater community.
Absolutely, and the goal is to make sure that patients are able to stay at home and be able to participate in their community. Right. But if we can't provide the staff needed in order to deliver that care, whether it's a CNA or a nurse or a therapist, because we don't have the reimbursement from the state to be able to compete in the labor market, we end up losing staff to not just within other parts of the healthcare sector like hospitals and nursing homes. We're losing some of that staff to fast food and retail.
Well, one of the challenges of the minimum wage pressure and the cost of living in the state is that while you effectively raise and some of the relationships with municipal and public labor unions, is that and again, please, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted you to come here tonight was to put truth to some of the conceptions or misconceptions that are floating around in the state. But every time the minimum wage law is passed, or it triggers increases in compensation in certain public workers unions, at the same time, you're not seeing a concomitant increase in your reimbursements to that make what is a very physically challenging, mentally taxing job, quite frankly, worthwhile for the individual on a financial level when compared to other income opportunities. I mean,
not to get too religious, but I always tell the staff, those that are directly providing care, that I truly believe that they are angels on earth in the vision of Mother Teresa. And they are caregivers.
Right.
And that they are performing something that is selfless, that many of us, maybe most of us, don't want to perform those tasks for their loved ones.
Right.
Whether that there's a fear of something would happen to that frail loved one, or that it's just, dealing with people and everything that comes with a person, is there areas that they don't want to touch, or that there's privacy concerns for that loved one.
Well, there's also the reality of that, and it happens in so many cases, particularly for folks in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, where that the person who was one of the most fundamentally important people in their lives, all of a sudden, in many cases, through debilitating illnesses, becomes the child in the relationship, and there's this incredible mix of emotions in dealing with your parent, your mother or your father, as if they were a child, and having to perform for them some of the most personal tasks imaginable. I mean, it's difficult, and so the ability to have someone who can, and again, forgive me if I'm way off base here, but maintain that sort of parent-child relationship by performing some of those incredibly personal day-to-day tasks, just living, keeps a sense of mom and dad and son, daughter.
It has to do with maintaining dignity for that loved one.
Right.
Whether it is a parent that is ill, or another loved one, a spouse.
Right.
By providing that dignity and respect, you see reduction in depression, which can escalate symptoms.
Right.
If that patient can't see that there's a positive path ahead, or to be able to maintain some of their goals based off of their restrictions for their remainder of their life if they're terminally ill, and maintain their wishes, or if they're chronically ill, there's certainly concerns about their dignity and being able to maintain certain goals based off of physical restrictions that they may have.
Right. Now, I ask this question because I'm not here, whenever I have a guest on, I mean, my personal political beliefs are quite strong, and I wear them on my shirt sleeves. They're there for everyone to see. So when I ask you this question, I'm not looking to get into the politics of this, of who's caused it, who's right, who's wrong, but just as someone who's immersed in the issue, and sees firsthand the challenges that you have created. Stepping aside from political culpability.
That's a 4-letter word that's not allowed in many households.
Right. I'm not here to bash anyone up in what we refer to here as halitosis. All credit to Rudy Cheeks. All right. What impact has UHIP had on a business level, on just a day-to-day practical level, with your constituency during your professional life?
Sure. So for my providers, UHIP has and still continues to cause significant challenges. The issues impacting home health care and more broadly long-term care really hasn't changed since UHIP. Most people, including the governor, focuses on the date of implementation of the computer system, Bridges, Rhode Island Bridges, on September 13th of 2016. Really, the main issue for my providers predicates that about 6 weeks to August 1st, 2016, when the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, under that time, was overseen by the former Lieutenant Governor, then Secretary Elizabeth Roberts, laid off approximately 70 caseworkers at the Department of Human Services. As you know, as a Rhode Islander, I as a lifelong Rhode Islander, that we live and thrive by our connections. And so what the secretary then and the governor now had banked on was that we didn't need those interpersonal connections. This computer system that we're rolling out is going to take the place of that. But we learned it didn't take the place of case management, and that centralized case management support doesn't and continues to not work. When you are, let's take my average patient. It's an 85-year-old widow who has a child that lives 10 or more miles away.
Right.
So for them, if they're receiving services through one of my 47 home care agencies, that CNA or that nurse may be the only person that they see over the course of a week.
Right.
That person becomes part of their family. When there are issues that may arise, if my provider picks up the phone to talk to that patient's case manager, or if the patient or a family caregiver calls, they're not assigned to a particular case manager anymore who knows and understands that situation of that particular patient and the family dynamic. It's whoever's picking up the phone and looking it up in the computer system, or in the case of long-term care applications, that they've abandoned the system until it gets fixed a year plus later, that they're still doing it by pen and paper. Well, let me take a look at that file. Well, they don't understand what that complexity is because they've never met the patient.
You've lost an entire realm, if you will, of institutional knowledge
Absolutely.
that is so important to an elderly or a chronically ill or an end-stage illness patient.
Or even, let me just add, a parent of a child with an exceptional disability.
Right, right. And you're right, Rhode Island is tribal. Rhode Islanders live on, it was one of the reasons why we're here in Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
You know, on a superficial level, the notion that you can walk into the coffee exchange and be sitting next to your state rep or sitting next to someone who's a broadcaster on the evening news. You know, that's why we don't go anywhere else, because there are no degrees of separation. So when you eliminate that from that dynamic, the result can be catastrophic.
Absolutely.
Because particularly since we live in these, you know, this highly nuclearized, almost polarized family structure, you know, you're right, that nurse literally, I've seen it personally, literally becomes, you know, they're there Christmas morning. Yeah. Because that nurse is the only contact with, in some cases, with an infirm stay-at-home patient, with, quite frankly, with reality.
Yeah, home care and hospice never sleeps. It is a 24/7, 365 business. We have to be. We have over 20,000 patients that are seen each year. We're larger than many facilities and networks combined.
Right.
The only difference is that we're operating in near 20,000 different locations throughout the state. So these folks need care based on what is their plan to receive services. Think of it like a prescription. It's authorized. Authorizations have been caught in this UHIP system, so patients aren't getting timely care or timely referrals. And providers are still not getting paid timely for services when they're performing these services and billing in good faith that the state will reimburse them. We were, prior to UHIP, healthcare providers. Today, we are interest-free financial institutions because we are providing care and carrying the state's debt. And when the state pays us, we're not earning interest for that. We get paid when we get paid. The system needs to be reformed, and in many ways, until we fix the computer system, we need to go back to the case management system prior to August 1st and make sure that providers get paid for the quality care that they deliver.
Because at the same time, caregivers have never been under more scrutiny, more pressure, both on a legal and also a philosophical sense, to provide a high level of care for their customers. I mean, the degree of, let's be blunt, criminal responsibility that you could be subject to as a provider should you fail to uphold the still somewhat ironically stringently enforced guidelines. You know, on one hand, as in so many cases with government, you've got, you know, maybe the money's gone away, but the guidelines are still there, and the reporting that you have to engage in is still there, and the responsibilities you have are still there. And there's, I can't imagine, I was self-employed for a number of years, I can't imagine the pressure that these folks are under, because everybody is so willing to jump ugly on a nursing home facility and we all realize there's sometimes when it's justified, but they're so eager to report on every potential wart, blemish, screw up that can happen in any business, yet at the same time, there doesn't seem to be that sense of urgency in taking care of all these other underlying issues, which ironically, as any sentient human being can see, are an impediment to the accurate and timely delivery of the responsibilities that they've taken on.
So look at it this way. Last month, we had our largest independent nonprofit agency close, Homefront Healthcare.
Right.
Had over 450 patients and about 300 staff members.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there was a 20-bed facility in the northern part of the state, the Nancy Ann Nursing Home, that was closing. So the response by our state elected and regulatory officials looked at that as they see the vision of here's a nursing home closing, and they see elders on gurneys being wheeled out. That's the scare.
Right.
But when it comes to those that are homebound, that are ill and need care in order for them to remain at home and not have to go into an emergency room or go into a nursing home at a more costly expense to taxpayers,
Exorbitant.
there isn't that vision of, oh gosh, what do we do with 450 patients that can't get care?
Right, because the optics are significantly different. The so much of what happens in this, and let's be blunt, if you, in your case, you work with it professionally, if you haven't experienced it personally to a family member, it's easy to, I'll take the high road, promote solutions. But until, like so many issues in our lives today, until it's part of the fabric of your daily life, you are ill-equipped to preach solutions.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, is that we try to take elected officials out on home care visits at the partnership. We have one scheduled in a couple of weeks with our newly elected state senator down in Newport and Jamestown.
Go on, yep.
And we try to do that, yes, Dawn Oyer. And so we try to provide that education early on, so this way they get that look and that feel
That's
of
a great
what
idea.
home care is, especially if they've never experienced it for a family member, or maybe even themselves if they had home care as part of a post-operative plan.
Right.
So we try to provide that education. Some take us up on it, others don't. Sometimes when they take us up on it and then they ascend to leadership, we get kind of lost in the shuffle.
Right.
So it's hard amongst probably 2,000 other priorities up at that state house that, to make sure that we're not lost in the shuffle. What ironically, going to your point, is that I sometimes get phone calls from those that have retired from the General Assembly and say, I'm looking for support for my elder parent or my spouse, and
Right.
I can't get services. How come? Can you help me? And I said, well, the reason why there is this backlog, or the reason why you can't get your referral filled, is because we don't have the labor force to be able to fill on demand, especially if they're a Medicaid case. And that is currently at the fault of the General Assembly by making sure that home care and hospice providers are not adequately funded, and that when they do receive increases, that they should be unencumbered. So when we face those challenges and receive those phone calls, I find it ironic because you could have been the one to help, especially if they were in leadership.
Right.
And sometimes I get those calls and they realize, oh, I wish I did something then, but it's too late. Tell those that are in there now, and that doesn't necessarily get translated.
Karma is a terrible
Quite
thing.
yeah.
It really is.
It's quite a challenge. But that's home care.
You're very polite. I've got to give you credit for that. Folks, if you're just joining us, Nicholas Oliver, he is in the early stages of his candidacy for the inaugural mayoralty of the great city of East Providence.
Yes.
He's joining us live on the coalition. By the way, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that this segment of the coalition is sponsored by Beacon Shipping and Logistics. You'll see all the links at coalitionradio.us. Shipping a car, buying a car remotely on the internet. You've got international reach with a Rhode Island company based right here in Warwick, Rhode Island. BeaconShippingLogistics.com. As we always say, whether it be Air Sciences, Beacon Shipping Logistics, iServices LLC, we've got a couple of new exciting sponsors to join up. Please support those folks who support independent media in the state. Events of the last few weeks prove conclusively that independent media is your best friend. whether it be 38 Stadium, whether it be the scandal du jour, as the legacy collective media literally gasps its last breath around us, it is up to independent media to provide the resources, the insight, and the issues-based conversation that you need as a Rhode Islander to effectively, A, run the state, and for you to make decisions as to how you want to see the state run. So again, Beacon Shipping Logistics, airsciences.net, and iServicesLLC.com, all sponsors of the coalition. And of course, we found at coalitionradio.us, where our direct link is now on the banner to our YouTube page, where this show and others like it live in perpetuity for you to examine, both A, to see and reflect again on the collectivism of our guests, and B, to mercilessly make fun of me. So feel free to go to coalitionradio.us, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. Please like our page there. And of course, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and our apolitical, all crony capitalist, anti-billionaire baseball club dream Twitter feed at Pawtucket is home. Folks, if you're a free Tuesday night, you know where I'll be. I'll be in the bucket, having another great chat with the Solons of the community, trying to reinforce the fact that somehow tax breaks for billionaires, even if you're a capitalist like me, kind of stink. But let's get back to our guest. So you've got quite a background then in solving problems and working with people at a variety of level, on the state level, in private industry, and at the community level, for probably one of the most challenging issues of our times.
Yes.
So I would guess it would be an understatement to say that will translate well into dealing with any one of the warring factions in East Providence on a given day, who don't even know that they're going to be at war with each other tomorrow. But
politics are colorful in East Providence. Yes.
Yeah, they are. Man, Cumberland is so sleepy. We need, in fact, if there's a couple of town councilmen and a few activists to be named later that you want to trade up to Cumberland, I tried to liven up things there a couple of weeks ago, and I got a collective yawn. No profiles encouraged exist in Cumberland, except for, of course, Mr. Schmidt and, of course, our town council chair. Otherwise, slim pickings.
Well, I can't speak to Cumberland, but I'd be happy to talk more about East Providence.
Well, let's talk about East Providence. The single biggest challenge, and where there are challenges, you and I recognize there are opportunities for East Providence. What's up there? Let's play political t-ball for a second.
Okay.
2018, you've gone through the whole charter process. You're elected mayor. What's first up? And believe me, after my exposure to this for the last 2 years, I'll say number one, people who are mayors and town council people and school board and water board people are true American patriots, because yikes. B, we all understand that in the current political landscape, every day you play political whack-a-mole. There is an issue that you don't even know about yet that is going to exist in about 72 hours, which is going to torture you, and you don't even know it's on its way yet. So at this moment in time, in September of 2017, what are the most pressing issues facing East Providence? What do townies got to look forward to?
So I've been promoting my Fresh Start agenda, which is focused on 3 specific issues that I continually hear throughout the community, and through this almost year-long exploration process that led me to last Sunday's formal announcement that I intend to run for the office next year, is that one, it has to do with our taxes and fees. We've seen increases in our taxes. We've seen increases in our water and sewer fees. We're seeing the rollback of our budget commission and having a financial advisor that's appointed by the state,
right,
that dictates or gives permission to some of the operating roles of the community under its current city manager, city council form of government.
Let me jump in there for a second, because this is a critical point in history. So many of the laws and regulations that surround near-death municipal experiences, we'll call them, obviously emanated from the crisis in Central Falls.
Right.
When Central Falls actually entered into bankruptcy.
And we were a half a step away from that.
Oh, absolutely. And it was actually you folks in West Warwick that I believe it was then Governor Carcieri had in mind when working with the legislature. They created this multi-step process that had to occur before you could just pitch the town into, I guess, Chapter 9. Where was East Providence then, and where do they stand now in that process?
So we no longer have the formal budget commission. We do have a state-appointed financial advisor that must provide clearance for decisions that are made that impact our city's budget, as well as our bonding ability and our bond capacity. So we are constrained currently in the current sense that we have to have this additional layer of approval for us to be able to make certain expenditures or to go out for ask the voters for bonds.
Right.
So, but we've seen these increases without any tangible results. Our infrastructure remains depleting. You don't have to go too far then to take a look if you're in Providence or neighboring Seekonk, Massachusetts, or anywhere within the city. You look up and see our water tower. It's a rusty bucket. It's an embarrassment. That is our skyline. And that's what you're seeing when you see East Providence in the waterfront. It's an embarrassment.
Right.
They've just started the process to have it painted, but that's an expensive process. And it just shows how we have not kept up with our infrastructure, whether it's underground pipes, buildings, municipal buildings, school buildings, the water tower, our roads. They've been neglected by our city councils of the past, even predating the Budget Commission.
Right.
And that's a reflection of our politics in the city, and it's a reflection of not having a long-term infrastructure maintenance, repair and replace plan. Our high school had a addition that was made less than 20 years ago that is not in the best shape. We have the remainder of the school, the campus that was built in the 50s, that is falling apart. When I was in high school in the mid-90s, we had these 55-gallon drums throughout various points of the second floor that would collect rainwater whenever it rained, or when it snowed, it would melt, leak, ice over, and then it would leak again when it would melt. It was not a conducive learning environment then.
Right.
Never mind to have the next generation experience that now.
Right.
That's not something I want to see our children experience, because if they're not in a conducive learning environment, then what does that mean that they're prepared for jobs of the 21st century? And let me also add, it is not a conducive work environment, a healthy work environment for our faculty and staff at the high school. But the problem isn't just our high school. It is other municipal buildings and other schools throughout the city. It is a significant problem, and we need to address our infrastructure with that long-term plan as well.
One of the challenges I would imagine as a town manager, as opposed to a mayoralty, and I've never lived in a town with a town manager, so again, feel free to jump in and correct me, is that a principal role of the mayor is, as W. Bush would have said, is the vision thing. You've got to have a vision to execute in order to have a path forward for a city. Our town managers, and I'm a technocrat, so I would love to, in a perfect world, think a town manager is the answer. Do town managers, is it typically within their purview to have that vision? And is the absence of that unified vision from the CEO one of the primary reasons why cities like East Providence struggle?
So I do think that there is a clear difference, that a mayor, an elected mayor, has a vision that is sold to the voters,
right,
that the voters buy into at the ballot. And then in turn, throughout that mayor's term, that he or she is accountable solely to each voter in that community. The difference with a city manager is a city manager may come in with a vision, but their vision may not necessarily be the vision of their city or town council.
Right.
East Providence has 5 city council members. They are elected by the 4 wards, and then there is one that is elected at large, and that at-large person may or may not be elected as the council president, or what they call today the ceremonial mayor. That city manager is, at the end of the day, not accountable to the residents of the city of East Providence. They're accountable to the 5 different members of the city council,
Right.
and is charged to execute 5 individual visions of how the city should operate and how the city should grow. It's a very difficult position, I would say, to be a city manager, because if you see different visions and different factions, like we currently have on the city council, and what the previous 6 city managers experienced over the course of the better part of the decade, with various city council members at any given term, that it's hard to make sure that there's this coalescence of the city council to have one vision to move us forward.
No, and you know, if you look at a more, I'll say where the local politics are on a much wider display statewide, if you look at Providence, you know, clearly if you had a city manager in Providence, you potentially have the interests of the south and west side at direct conflict with the interests of the east side. And I mean, if you look at the differences there between the goals, the objectives, the current status economically, those two areas couldn't be more different, and only by action of geography exist within the same city.
Yeah, the needs and culture are different in a larger community like Providence. In East Providence, I mean, we have 4 distinct neighborhoods, or wards, if you will. So there's Rumford, Central East Providence, Kent Heights, and Riverside. And certainly there are micro neighborhoods in between. But for them, there is different economic classes, different cultural diversity, different needs. Some neighborhoods have seen higher unemployment than others, given the type of work or careers that they may have. And that's the final facet, or the third facet, if you will, of my Fresh Start agenda, is being able to bring jobs back to the many vacant buildings, commercial and industrial, along the waterfront, as well as throughout the city, and that be able to identify employers and those that are unemployed and make sure that they have that skill set needed. Now, you hear other politicians talk about jobs, and that needs to be the tenet of their campaign, and if elected, the tenet of their term. But the difference is that we do a great job in our city promoting kids to graduate the high school and go on to college. And we do the same for those that are military bound. We just had a military helicopter fly in, I believe it was 2 days ago, into the parking lot of the high school to promote those that are interested in the military, to get them excited and want them to learn more. But we have a career and technical center that's adjacent to our high school. We used to call it the VOC, or the vocational school, when I was there. And so we don't do enough for the kids at the VOC that are career bound. Not everybody is college or military bound. We have folks that are career bound, that need the skill set to be able to be licensed, have an apprentice, in order to jumpstart their career, or maybe even go on to a college or a trade school to enhance their marketability and their education in a particular trade. But we want them to be ready out of high school to be able to enter into the workforce and be competitive in the labor market. And we're not doing enough for them. So much so that when we went back to our previous conversation about my experience with home health care, until a few years ago, there was a robust health professions program at the VOC. And they decided that it was costly, it was they didn't make the connections to healthcare providers, although we're becoming a medical mecca, if you will, for the state. And we're bringing in medical companies in and talking about corporate welfare. Lots of property tax breaks that are given to these. Most recently on Kettle Point with University Orthopedics building their castle there. I think it's great. I don't think it's the best use of our waterfront property. I don't believe that it was meritorious to give them the tax breaks that they received. And it doesn't mean that after the tax breaks expire that they say, great, we're going to pick up to whoever's giving us the next opportunity.
Hallelujah.
What does that mean as far as
from your lips to God? Yes. Sweet.
But with those students, we need to provide them the opportunities to be able to jump into those careers. I don't have CNAs that I can pull from the East Bay, which is one of the vast wastelands, if you will, of getting home health care services. It's hard. We have 8 companies there, but they compete harder than any other place in the state for the labor market, because there is no vine of grabbing new people to come into that workforce, with the VOC school no longer having that program. We need to re-energize that and match students earlier so this way they can have jobs and stay here in East Providence.
Right, hallelujah. I mean, I during my I have a day job, and I work directly with trades, and I can say this as someone in their 50s. If I were to, and obviously there's a broad generalization, but if I were to look at a group of people who have more control over them, who have more financial security, more upward income potential, more equity in a business they're building, it would have to be people who own businesses in the trades. And to own a business in the trade, one needs to start working in the trades. And what's astonishing to me is that as our commitment to vocational education recedes into a distant memory, and where the term voc has almost become archaic, I remember it certainly, there's been this rise of private for-profit colleges, some of them are very fine, like New England Tech, rising to take their place at a significant college-like cost, when in fact, if this was implemented at the high school level, you would have an entire generation of highly skilled Rhode Islanders who were welcomed into the workplace, whether it be here in Rhode Island or nearby Massachusetts, where there's as equal a need. How crazy is it that we have an educational system that has failed an entire generation where they're grotesquely underemployed, they're grotesquely channeled in the wrong direction, aggressively channeled to pursue a college education that, quite frankly, in more cases than most, does not make sense.
Not everybody is college bound, and that's okay, and we need to embrace that. I may not be able to know how to fix my car. I'm going to need to go to somebody who is. I may not be able to figure out what is wrong with me when I have a health condition. I need to go to somebody who does. May not be a great cook, but I can go to somebody who is a great chef and teach me how. We have all of these types of programs. If I had hair, I would need somebody to have to cut my hair. We don't have these programs anymore, or are strong. And Pat, one of the things that you talk about on your program has to do with political machines. Mm-hmm. We have a robust political machine in East Providence. It makes our politics colorful. Mm-hmm. But if you take a look at who those people are behind that machine, they come from representing various trade groups or unions. Mm-hmm. And you would think that that would be their number one priority, right, because it's building their constituency. And it's not. They have left our elected officials, our political machine operating behind the scenes, have neglected that career and technical center and left those particular career-bound kids behind.
Right. And so often it's first of all, I believe as a nation, and Mike Rowe of
yes,
the Dirty Jobs has been a huge advocate in this nationally. We have come to realize, I would hope at this point, that technical jobs are no longer a quote-unquote step down from college. In fact, if you know a machinist, a plumber, a pipe fitter, an electrician, and you actually work alongside them, what you'll come to understand very quickly that is they are not lesser than college. It's just different. And quite frankly, the degree track that they have to pursue is often much more arduous, much more demanding, much more technical than many of your typical middle-of-the-road, nondescript college degree programs. And in fact, when those folks who later on in the career are given the advantage of access to a more business-style education to complement their experience in the trades, become dynamic parts of the local economy, providing jobs and wealth for all, including themselves. And that's what we need more of. That's the secret sauce here. Getting away from... Again, I put the blinders on for a second. We've got a governor who just obsesses with sending everybody to college. Yikes. But that's me, not you. So you're going to dive right into that. And again...
I look at it this way. It is very personal. I could comment on the governor, too. I'm not afraid to do that. Is that some of the jobs that we're marketing are highly technical, don't necessarily require a college education. The education plan and the economic development plan, there's no cohesion. And there needs to have that cohesiveness in order for us to be able to have a specific marketing plan to bring real jobs back into the state. Mm-hmm. Now, that isn't necessarily a slight on the governor. It's just the governor's particular vision that I think needs refinement, and is why we have lagged bringing in many jobs, as well as many companies in, and keeping those jobs, as well as keeping jobs of some of the legacy companies that were founded here in Rhode Island that we're seeing losing in our marketplace. But the issue about our Career Technical Center, or VOC, I'm the product of two VOC students. My parents both went to the VOC school. My wife went to the VOC school. And they have led successful lives. And, my folks raised their family and did well for themselves. My wife and I, same thing. We do well for ourselves, and it's because of hard work, and for my wife and even my folks. Mm-hmm. It had to do with hard work and that foundation that they've received in the VOC program.
Right. No, that's outstanding. Property taxes in East Providence. What are different ways you can approach that? Because I'm told they can be quite confiscatory in nature at this point. You've got this crazy patchwork quilt of taxes, car taxes, property taxes.
Don't forget the dining tax.
Yeah, about that.
That doesn't necessarily translate into going back to the municipality in which that revenue was collected. And that's the thing. We need to have tangible results. If there are going to be taxes, they need to directly correlate to improving the community, not a city general fund, and certainly not a state general fund. Because what does that lead to? It leads to a politician's candy store. And that it's doling out at will. And then you say, well, for my providers, well, we don't have the money this year. Show me the money. I've heard it time and time again. Even when a member of my community, Helio Mello, was finance chair under then Speaker Gordon Fox. Show me the money. But we seem to find money to lower car taxes, lower beach fees, because it's good politics to do such.
Right.
Give college for all, or refine a plan to do such, to create these wage pass-throughs that don't lead to meaningful results, and paid sick time, which is another unfunded mandate. Great benefit. It should be a value for employers. If the state's the employer, they need to pass that on to their contractors, but they don't do that. The plans and the ideas match good politics, feel good politics,
right,
but don't necessarily match specific results.
Right. I was on Lively Experiment this morning with Jim Homlin as a father of two, and my children are older now. They're just in and just out of college. I certainly have empathy and sympathy for any parent who finds himself in a terrible position where they have to choose between employment and staying home with their kiddos. I mean, that's as rough as it gets. And even some of us who have had sick time because of the job pressures we face need to make that awful decision when your kid's there is miserable. At the same time, as much as I respect the need to create that, I also wish the state would provide equal effort into creating a level playing field where the tools and the abilities of the free market can take hold, so that everyone, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of what industry they're in, whether that industry be STEM, STEAM, STERN, whatever, all right, has the ability to prosper on the fruits of their own sweat equity and their own risk capital, however they may find it, at arm's length, with institutions designed to provide that, not with the state government that, as you so aptly pointed out, just seems hell-bent on build it, in my current words I should say, build it and they will come, but at the same time with no long-term plan for maintaining that investment. It's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, for many communities and even in the state, you probably get better bang for your buck playing at the craps table at Twin River than some of these economic development plans, including in East Providence.
Well, now, this brings up a sticky issue, because I spent some quality time at the State House Thursday night, 7 hours of quality time. The legacy media, I spent probably, I want to tell you how many hours I've spent invested in this Pawsox issue. The legacy media chose to sum up my participation in that merely by pointing out that I was the first one to speak at 10 o'clock. It was an opponent to the stadium, as opposed to, actually, you ready for this? God forbid, let's not get crazy here, but diving into any one of 2 or 3 dozen, as one heckler pointed out, endless list of economic concerns relative to the Paw Sox Stadium. That's what passes for the legacy media in the state, and that's what passes for quote-unquote government. So you had this, literally every mayor, every deputy mayor, every process server got up there to line up and just say how much they love the notion of a government subsidy for an entertainment business, including the senator from East Providence, Mr. Conley. Now, I'm not asking you, I'm asking you to step aside again from the politics of the issue,
Sure.
but you've made some very clear, cogent points about subsidies. What do you think about the Paw Sox?
I'm not a fan of corporate welfare deals.
Mm-hmm.
Let me actually back up and say that my heart really does go out to Mayor Gribbian and the people of Pawtucket. The Paw Sox is an identity of that community, a community that has otherwise economically struggled.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the mills went away,
Mm-hmm.
and they have struggled for decades on trying to do an economic reinvestment, trying to find what industries could stay and thrive in that community and maintain that identity. But its heart is in the Paw Sox. I can't imagine what Ben Mondor would be thinking today, seeing what is happening to his beloved stadium and his beloved team. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't problems with the physical plant of that stadium. But we as a state, and certainly those that are in neighboring Pawtucket, have invested millions of dollars into its repair. To have a class of ownership that could invest in that stadium or invest in another stadium and not have to worry about what it would mean to their own personal pockets, and probably wouldn't hurt them too much for the going out to dinner or the vehicles that they're driving or the homes that they own.
You think?
That we would have to put it on an economically challenged state to foot the bill, where we haven't seen economic studies to see a rate of return. I had a council member in East Providence who proposed and even took Google Maps, and on our waterfront at Bold Point, where there was supposed to be a Pat Benatar concert tonight because of the current weather, it got canceled.
Right.
To put a proposed stadium like the one that they were proposing on the Apex site in Pawtucket, right there on Bold Point. And let's give out corporate welfare tax breaks in order to incentivize them to come to East Providence. Let's break out the defibrillator to the taxpayers when we can't even build a high school nor have the bond capacity to do that. But we're going to dole out corporate welfare to bring this team here, a farm team here. I love the Paw Sox, but is it worth creating, as you call it, 38 stadium? I have significant heartburn that that would be the best use of my tax dollars and not see a long-term rate of return. But again, it's not an issue that East Providence will be looking at. I hope not between now and next year. If elected mayor, it is not something that would be a priority on my list. But, you know, to Mayor Gribbian, I wish him well in his proposal. I know he's trying to do the right thing for his community and maintain that identity. And I can't see another community having that team there and it feel the same and bring that same sense of pride as the Mondor family had when they owned it.
As someone who would be mayor, I think one we can definitely agree on is the notion that when it comes to civic pride, though, it's far more important for the average working Rhode Islander to feel pride in their schools. It's far more important for someone who lives in Pawtucket to feel pride in mall after mall on Newport Avenue being occupied by thriving businesses. It's far more important to them to not be facing the closure of a fire station. It's far more important to them that their community be safe than it is for the average working Rhode Islander who's got a couple of kids and every morning wakes up and says, okay, how am I going to get through this day? Just like you and me.
Yep.
I'm no different. Those are the issues that they're concerned with. This notion that there will be some moral philosophical collapse if in fact the Paw Sox cease to be affiliated with the city of Pawtucket, I think, in my words, I think is quite frankly ludicrous. It's just the notion that they would collateralize this obligation, as one flavor of legislation has it, with their future state aid for a city that is as challenged as they are, and that is not an insult. You know, when people like me say that, there are those forces who would try to portray that as an insult. It is not an insult. I think that some of the brewery business and some of the other businesses that are building up organically speak to great things for the city of Pawtucket, and an even playing field in a free market environment has the potential to attract businesses, and potentially teams that are willing to pay their own way into Pawtucket. There's no silver bullet, there's no special sauce, there's no break glass, add water. As you're facing in East Providence, it's a generational issue that is not going to be fixed overnight by some Hail Mary economic pass to a group of people who clearly care not for the financial issues surrounding Rhode Island, or quite frankly, they'd use their own risk capital and build it themselves.
Or we need to come up with a plan B for the use of McCoy Stadium and go market that stadium to another team or another league that'd be willing to come in. Remember, most people in the state of Rhode Island are only a paycheck or two away from poverty. I don't believe that this stadium and keeping this team is their top priority on their list of concerns to maintain their homes, maintain the quality of life, or improve the quality of life for their family.
Right. No, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, we need an economics intervention in this state. We need folks to sit down and confront these issues and accept first and foremost that, again, there's no quick fix. It took us 60 or 70 years to get us to this point. It's going to take, hopefully not that long, but it's going to take a few years of really hard, issues-based, focused work to get us out of it. And the earlier we start, quite frankly, the better we'll be, and we won't lose another generation to failed schools, and we won't lose another generation to, I believe it's been said, the soft bigotry of diminished expectations. And I have to tell you, you know, as I like to joke, I'm 56 years old. My mom in the 60s was one of the leaders of the Democratic Party in our town, so effectively I'm entering my 51st year in following politics. I'm impressed as hell. I love your perspective, and I love what you have to offer. Just as kind of a final note, what's unique about this setup, I guess, going forward is there is no Republican Party, there is no Democratic Party to the mayor as is currently constituted. It's apolitical in the one sense. You are running as an independent,
yes,
and everyone will be.
We run without party designations.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that
there isn't
individual candidates have a political party or that there is some background.
Right. That's a great idea, because it becomes less about the D and the R, or in my case the L, and it becomes more about what's really important.
Yeah. I'm running to be accountable to all 47,000 plus residents of the city of East Providence. I'm not running to be mayor for the select few.
Outstanding. Where can people find you on the web? Are you taking political contributions yet, or is that sort of on hold until you enter the next stage of the campaign? Where is all of that right now?
So the campaign is up and running. We studied my viability of my candidacy, and learned that I'm competitive against a number of rank and file politicians. It's the same list of regurgitated folks that we complain about. Yeah, the usual suspects.
Right.
Yeah, that folks that we're not seeing results, but we elect these same folks. I'm a non-traditional candidate, and I am looking to provide an option to voters, and we've learned throughout this process thus far that I am a viable candidate. We do have a campaign established. We are receiving donations. We had our kickoff this past Sunday, where we filled the room. The next time that I do an event, I need to be in a larger space. But for folks that are looking to learn more information about the Fresh Start Agenda, the We Are One East Providence initiative, or to learn about my family, we have a great video up on our website
I've seen it.
that introduces my family, the issues that I want to work on behalf of the residents and taxpayers of East Providence, and what my vision for the future, if elected mayor, and given that opportunity. They can find me at www.oliver4ep.com.
Excellent. And there's links there if they want to contribute or if they want to volunteer.
Absolutely. And encourage voters to take a look at that video. I'm impressed. It was produced by someone who just became a citizen of the United States a couple of months ago, and he did an impressive job and did my family well, and I think is a great kickstart to our campaign. I'm really proud of it.
No, I'm excited for you, and I'm very, very impressed, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness from which you're addressing all the issues, and quite frankly, it's clear that on two levels you've invested a great deal in this. In the run-up to this, you've spent a great deal of time working in the community in a variety of capacities, and at the same time, it's clear that you've given a significant amount of thought to the underlying issues that challenge and provide opportunities for the town itself. And that's something that's an ingredient that's been sorely missing in Rhode Island politics. Someone a lot smarter than me once said that politics and public service are supposed to be for people who want to help lives, not get one. And I've always loved that. I just think that kind of sums it up neatly. So I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us. And the door's open if you've got issues that you want to discuss or present and challenges that face East Providence. And as you go through this whole end stage of the charter and the run up to the election itself, just let me know.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to talk with you and to be able to have an opportunity to speak to your listeners.
Super. Nicholas Oliver running for the mayoralty. The inaugural is something we're looking forward to in just a year and a half away. He's running as an independent for the first mayoralty of East Providence. He brings to the table significant industry as well as not-for-profit experience spanning some of the most complicated issues facing Rhode Island and, quite frankly, Americans today. A healthy perspective on the role of government and economic development certainly doesn't hurt, particularly given the madness that we're surrounded by at this point. Links, of course, to the website are already up on our Facebook page. And again, this interview will be available for your viewing pleasure in perpetuity on coalitionradio.us, where a simple click to our YouTube page will bring you right to it. Congratulations, and thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Pat.
All right.
Thank you.